Welcome in. Perhaps you've been thinking all day. Maybe your mind has carried 1,000 small questions, sorted through messages, rehearsed tomorrow, and quietly wondered if it ever gets to rest. It does. Tonight, it does. For the next 2 hours or so, we're going to share 100 gentle, relaxing facts about something you might not expect to hear about at bedtime: creativity. Not the loud kind, not the productivity kind, the quiet kind, the kind that lives in the soft space behind your eyes, in the part of you that drifts, that wanders, that dreams. Here's what perhaps surprises people most. The brain doesn't create when it's pushing. It creates when it's softening. When you drift off tonight, your mind will be doing the same quiet work that once visited Mendeleev and gave him the periodic table, the same work that visited Kekule and showed him the shape of benzene, the same work that woke Paul McCartney with the melody of a song he thought he'd heard somewhere. You don't have to try. You don't have to listen carefully. You don't have to remember any of this. If you fall asleep after the first fact, that's a perfect ending. If you stay a while, that's also a perfect ending. Every fact here is its own small room. You can step into one or into all of them, in whatever order your evening allows. The voice you'll hear is meant to whisper, not teach. The facts are meant to loosen something, not build anything. So perhaps, if you'd like, let the jaw soften first. The shoulders can lower just a little, as if releasing a coat that no longer fits the night. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to become anything. You're allowed to just drift. And perhaps one more soft thing. Before we step into the first fact, you don't have to understand any of this. You don't have to follow the order. The brain you are listening with is already, quietly, more creative than you might think. The rooms inside you are already arranging themselves for the night. Whatever pace your evening wants, the voice will match it. If you fall asleep mid-sentence, the sentence will finish. Gently, without you. If you wake briefly in the middle of the night, you are welcome back. Nothing here is being measured. Nothing here is being graded. Only this small, unhurried company through the soft hours. So perhaps the room can grow a little quieter inside you. Perhaps the day can step back. Just one slow step. Perhaps the night can begin to arrive at its own pace. Without being asked, let's begin. Gently. Perhaps you've been told creativity belongs to artists, to inventors, to a rare few. But tonight, gently, we'd like to suggest something softer. Creativity. In nearly every study scientists have done of it, turns out to be as common as breath. The same neural patterns that light up in a sculptor deciding how to turn a stone also light up in you when you choose what to say to a friend, or when you picture a dish you've never cooked. Researchers often use something called the alternate uses task, asking people to think of many ways to use a paperclip, a brick, a shoe, and the results, across cultures, across ages, across many kinds of minds, show the same thing. Every mind generates novelty. Every gentle awareness is a maker in some small way. Creativity was never reserved. It was never locked away. Tonight, perhaps you can let go of the quiet belief that creativity is somewhere else. It has always been here, as close as the breath that carries these words to you. Here is something gentle that brain scans have shown again and again. When researchers ask people to lie still in an MRI scanner and do nothing at all, a network of soft glowing regions turns on. They call it the default mode network. It connects parts of the brain involved in memory, imagination, and self-reflection. In a well-known study by Roger Beatty in 2014, scientists looked at the resting brains of people who scored high on creativity tests. Those brains showed a steadier, richer connectivity in the default mode network, even when they weren't doing anything creative at all. It suggests the creative brain is creative at rest. It doesn't need to be pushed. It hums quietly, whether you notice or not. Even now, as you settle into the quiet of the evening, a soft glow may be rising in your own mind without you lifting a finger. Perhaps somewhere along the way, someone suggested creativity had to be earned, that it came with talent, or training, or the right family, or the right school. Research gently suggests otherwise. Every developmental study of early childhood shows that novelty generation is one of the first abilities to emerge before language is fully formed. Before counting, before the self becomes clear, children invent words, stories, songs, imaginary friends, and entirely new games, often with no encouragement at all. This tells us creativity is not a skill learned later. It's a baseline of how the human mind organizes itself. You were born doing this. You still do it. Most nights, without noticing. So perhaps you can rest the small idea that you need to earn this. It came with you. It stays with you. It asks nothing of you tonight. Here is a quiet fact about language itself. The English word create comes from the Latin crea, which meant to bring into being, and crea shares its deepest root with words that meant to grow, to cause to grow, to let rise. The older cousin of create is a word farmers once used for what happens to grain in soil. This matters gently, because it tells us how people once understood the act of making. They didn't picture forcing. They didn't picture straining. They pictured a seed placed into dark earth and a slow rising that couldn't be rushed. When the word create was used, it was used in the same breath as sunlight on fields. Other languages carry the same gentle inheritance. The Greek poiein, from which we draw the word poet, originally meant simply to make in the same plain way a baker makes bread, or a river makes a path. The Sanskrit root kar, which lies behind many old words for action, was used as much for breathing as for building. The deepest human languages did not separate creation from quiet. Daily, almost agricultural acts. Only later, in the noisier centuries, did the word grow taller and harder. At its root, to create is still, simply, to let something rise. You are not meant to force creation. You are meant, like a garden, to let it rise in its own time, in its own quiet way, while you sleep. Perhaps, if you'd like, let the jaw soften now, as if it had been holding a small question all day. Some of the most creative minds of the past kept sleep as their closest companion. Einstein famously slept around 10 hours a night and took short naps during the day. Charles Darwin built his most famous walks around long midday rests. Nikola Tesla credited a vivid dream for the idea of alternating current Leonardo da Vinci experimented with short, polyphasic bursts of sleep so he could remain close to dream states. Ingmar Bergman kept a soft 10-2, 11-hour rest ritual. These were not lazy people. They were people who understood that the soft side of the mind does much of the work. They treated sleep like a collaborator, not a competitor. You are tonight keeping company with them. Every breath that settles you deeper is a quiet agreement with centuries of makers who knew the same gentle truth. You might not think of creativity as a rhythm, but that's what the newest research keeps finding. When neuroscientists watch the brain during creative tasks, they see oscillations, waves, rising and falling in regular patterns. Alpha rhythms in one phase, theta rhythms in another, small gamma bursts during moments of insight, and a return to alpha when the idea settles. These rhythms happen whether you're painting or washing dishes or drifting into sleep. They are the brain's heartbeat for making, and like any rhythm, they don't ask for your attention to continue. They keep time quietly. The way a metronome keeps time for a room where the musician has stepped away, perhaps you can simply listen, without trying to understand, as the rhythm of your creative mind plays softly in the background of the night. For decades, psychology treated the wandering mind as a kind of malfunction, a sign of inattention, a symptom of being unfocused. But as measurement tools improved, researchers discovered something gentler. The wandering mind is not failing, it's doing a different job. A 2010 study at Harvard found that minds wander roughly 47% of waking hours, across every kind of task. That's nearly half of consciousness. And the kind of wandering that feels free and soft, what researchers now call freely moving mind wandering, correlates strongly with creative output, not with low mood. The mind wanders because that's part of what minds do. It's a feature, not a flaw. If your mind has wandered 100 times today, that's all right. It was simply doing its own kind of gentle work, and now it's allowed to wander toward rest. Here is a final quiet thought before we move on. In a world that measures a day by output, it can feel strange to say rest is creative. But across many serious studies of creative breakthroughs, the kind collected in the archives of the history of psychology, the kind Csikszentmihalyi documented in his interviews with Nobel laureates, one pattern repeats. The insight almost never comes during the effort. It comes during the walk, the bath, the nap, the quiet breakfast afterward. The effort prepares the soil. The rest brings the harvest. Giving yourself permission to not be productive tonight is itself a quiet, creative act. You are tending the soil, so perhaps you can release, softly, the small voice that says, you should be doing something more. You are doing the quiet work of being human, and that was always enough. This first soft cluster ends here, and the next one begins by lingering on the wandering mind itself, perhaps the most loved, most blamed, most misunderstood part of being human. Whenever you're ready, we'll step into it together, slowly, the way one might step into a familiar field at dusk. Perhaps this is one of the most gently surprising discoveries of modern neuroscience. For a long time, scientists assumed the resting brain was idle, simply waiting for the next task. Then, in the late 1990s, a researcher named Marcus Raichler noticed something curious in his MRI scans. Certain regions lit up brightly every time a person stopped doing a task. They turned on when effort turned off. He called this The default mode network, a kind of backstage crew that takes over the lights the moment the actors step off stage. We now know this network handles imagination, memory, self-reflection, and the weaving of possible futures. It only truly comes online when you stop trying. So perhaps there is a gentle freedom in letting the day's tasks fall away. You are not turning the mind off. You are handing it to its quietest, most creative self. You might notice the shoulders lowering, just a little, as if releasing a coat. The default mode network includes several key regions: the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate, the angular gyri. These names are lovely, but not needed. What matters is what they do together. They weave, they take fragments of memory, bits of self, scraps of imagined futures, and knit them into coherent thoughts. They are the silent loom behind every daydream, every mental rehearsal of tomorrow. Every unexpected connection between a smell and a childhood summer. Think of this network as an old weaver who lives behind your eyes. Patient, unhurried, working best in dim light and quiet rooms. As you let the shoulders soften, you may be giving that weaver exactly the light it prefers, the soft, fading amber of the evening. Here is a distinction that might bring some quiet relief. Not all mind wandering is the same. Researchers now gently separate it into two kinds. One is sticky, anxious, looped the mind returning again and again to the same worry. The same conversation, the same outcome. That kind is called rumination, and it has a gripping quality. The other kind is soft and free, the mind moving from a memory to a thought to an imagined scene. None of them pressing, none of them demanding. This is freely moving mind wandering. Studies led by Joe and colleagues in 2024, with more than 1,300 participants, found that only the freely moving kind links to creative ability. Worry and creativity live on different streets. Perhaps tonight, if worry visits, you can let it drift past like a cloud, and perhaps, in its place, the gentler wandering can return the kind with no hands, only soft movement. That same 2024 study is worth lingering on. Researchers used a combination of brain scans and long questionnaires with 1,316 participants, asking them to describe the quality and movement of their inner thoughts over weeks. Then they looked at who scored highest on a classical creativity measure, the alternate uses task. The finding was consistent and strong. People whose minds drifted freely without force, without anxiety, produced the richest and most original ideas, and their brain scans showed a distinctive pattern, rich connectivity across the default mode network, with small bridges to attention systems. Their inner weavers had many looms open and worked in quiet collaboration. What's especially gentle about the finding is that originality wasn't tied to effort or willpower. It was tied to softness. The most original minds, in this study and in many others, did not strain. They allowed. They let one thought become another, and another. Without trying to keep score, their creativity rose out of the same quiet ground as their rest. Effort, in fact, was almost a hindrance. The deeper they let the wandering go, the more interesting the bridges between thoughts became. Perhaps you are part of a far larger fellowship than you knew, a fellowship of minds that drift. And in drifting, Discover. Perhaps you sometimes feel like you're the only one whose mind won't stay still. The numbers gently suggest otherwise. Across multiple large studies, including daily experience sampling research by Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert at Harvard, the average adult mind wanders between 30 and 50% of waking hours. That's 4 to 6 hours a day. It happens during conversations, during reading, during cooking, during commuting. It is the most common non-task activity of a human life. We tend to remember only the moments when the wandering was inconvenient. We forget the countless hours it gave us ideas, insights, warmth, and small glimpses of old joys. You are not failing at focus. You are doing what every thinking creature has done since thought began drifting between one soft thought and another. In the gentle current of being alive, here is a quiet piece of cognitive science. The inner voice that comments on your day. The one that replays a conversation from hours ago. The one that whispers small rehearsals of tomorrow. This narrator uses the very same brain machinery as a novelist inventing a story. Research tracking narrative construction in the brain finds that mind-wandering episodes and deliberate story creation activate overlapping networks. The structures don't know the difference. For the brain, the story you tell yourself while drifting and the story a writer tells on the page are close cousins. Every daydream is a small novella published only inside you. So perhaps tonight, whatever soft story your mind is drifting through, you can receive it as a small gift, one narrator's gentle offering to the other. Whenever you're ready, let the skin between the eyebrows smooth. Nothing to figure out right now. When researchers ask people to describe freely moving thought, the metaphors are remarkably consistent. People say it feels like floating, drifting on a river, watching clouds move, being inside a slow-falling snow globe. The language is always soft, always gravityless. This is partly because of the neurochemistry. When the default mode is active and stress hormones are low, the brain's internal signals have a gentle, non-urgent quality. There is no threat being tracked. There is no puzzle being forced. There is only the quiet motion of one thought releasing into the next. Perhaps you can let yourself float just a little now, forehead smooth. Thoughts unhurried, as if the whole evening were a lake made of calm water. Perhaps this is the gentle theme of this whole section. Every time your mind wanders while you stare out a window, every time you go quiet while making tea, every time you drift off during a slow moment of the evening, something is being made. Cognitive scientists call it incubation. It's the hidden phase of every creative act. James Webb Young described it as the unconscious processing stage, and Graham Wallace named it in his 4-stage model of creative thought back in 1926. Every breakthrough in the history of invention passed through a phase where the creator appeared from the outside to be doing nothing at all. Helmholtz, the great 19th century physiologist, described the same pattern in himself: long stretches of preparation, then an interval of leaving the problem alone, then the gentle arrival of a clear idea, often during a slow walk on a wooded morning. Poincaré, the mathematician, described stepping onto a bus in Coutances and feeling, with no warning, the geometric solution he had been chasing for weeks settle quietly into his mind. The pattern is older than the words for it. It is simply how minds work when they are allowed to. Tonight, as you let yourself do nothing, You are participating in the oldest, quietest part of making the part no one sees, but every maker knows by name, the part that asks for nothing back, the part that arrives in soft minutes and goes unrecorded. You are in good, ancien company. And the company is asking nothing of you tonight, except perhaps to settle a little deeper into the warmth of where you are. This is one of the quietly beautiful findings of modern neuroscience. When you remember your last birthday, and when you imagine a birthday next year, you activate almost exactly the same brain regions, primarily the hippocampus, working with the medial prefrontal cortex and the angular gyrus. Demis Hassabis and Eleanor Maguire, in 2007, published a landmark paper showing that memory and imagination are neural twins. The brain does not keep a separate folder for things that happened and things that could happen. It uses one shared workshop for both, rearranging the same materials to remember and to invent. So, every time you have imagined a possible future, you have been drawing from the same soft cloth as your memories, and both were made by the same gentle hands. Here is another thread of that finding worth unspooling. People with hippocampal damage, those who have lost the ability to form new episodic memories, also lose the ability to imagine specific future scenes. When asked to picture a future picnic, they can describe it only in vague abstractions, never in sensory detail. The grass is not green in any particular way. The basket has no weight. This tells us that imagination depends on the same neural scaffolding as memory. You cannot picture what you have not in some small way experienced, but because you have experienced so much, you can picture a world no one has ever seen. Every rememberer is also a maker. Every maker carries years of remembered light in their hands. You are both, every night, without effort. Here is a soft thought about how memory actually works. When you remember a beach from childhood, you don't pull up a film recording. Memory doesn't work that way. What your brain does is reconstruct the beach fresh. Every time you remember it taking the gist of sand, the gist of sunlight, the gist of sea smell, and the gist of you at that age, and stitching a new version together, which means every remembered beach is also a freshly composed beach. Daniel Schachter at Harvard has written extensively about this. He calls memory a constructive act. The mind is a humble artist, working with old sketches every time you look backward. Tonight, any memory that drifts by is a small painting your mind has just made for itself. You can look at it gently. You don't have to hold it. It will return. Softly. If it's wanted again, maybe the fingers unfurl. Gently, like petals done with the day. In the study led by Demis Hassabis in 2007, patients with bilateral hippocampal damage were asked to imagine being on a beach, in a forest, in a pub. Healthy participants described rich scenes: the wet sand, the bark of trees, the hum of conversations. The patients could not. They produced fragments, disconnected and flat, without spatial coherence. The finding gently reshaped decades of assumption. Memory is not just storage. Memory is the very engine by which we imagine forward. Without the hippocampus, the imagined future goes dim. With it, every possibility becomes a gentle scene. The hippocampus, smaller than a thumb, curved like a small seahorse on each side of the brain, is doing this work right now, in you. As you listen, it is not heavy work. It is not loud work. It is the quiet labor of holding the scenes you have lived close enough that they can be borrowed for the scenes you have not yet lived. Some neuroscientists have suggested the hippocampus is less a storage device and more a kind of imagination engine, and that imagination is simply what memory does when the future asks it a question. Whatever scenes drift through your mind tonight, a room, a fatu, a place you've never been, each one is a quiet collaboration between what you've lived and what you could still live. Perhaps a phrase like this can carry the whole section. Research on creative combination consistently finds that novel ideas are rarely built from nothing. They are built from recombinations, pieces of old memories, placed together in new arrangements. Cognitive scientist Margaret Bowden called this combinational creativity. When Salvador Dali painted melting clocks, he combined clock memory with the memory of a melting camembert cheese he had noticed after lunch. When a child invents an imaginary friend, the friend is composed from dozens of familiar faces, softly rearranged. Imagination is memory that has been given permission to move. Tonight, as old images rise and recombine in the gentle dark, your mind is doing exactly what every great imagination has ever done, remembering. Softly, in new shapes. Here is a very small example, gently worth noticing. Picture, for a moment, a ceramic cup you've never held. Maybe it has a handle, maybe not. Maybe it's glazed pale green, maybe deep blue. In that 1 second of picturing, your brain has drawn on hundreds of memories of other cups, other glazes, other hands, other kitchens, and composed a single new object in your inner gallery. This is the most ordinary act of imagination, and yet it is a full creative event. The visual cortex, the motor cortex, the parietal regions for spatial layout, all of them contribute. Every imagined cup is a small, quiet symphony of cooperation. So even the smallest inner pictures you make tonight are the product of an orchestra that never grows tired. Let them come. Let them go. No one is counting them. Here is a soft image you might carry into the rest of the night. The hippocampus, curved like a small seahorse, tucked deep in each temporal lobe, does something librarianish every night. It takes the day's experiences, labels them, and begins the long work of filing them into networks across the cortex. During sleep, particularly in slow-wave stages, it replays the day at many times normal speed, sending small echoes of daytime activity through the rest of the brain. Scientists can literally see these replays in neural recordings. Your hippocampus at night is a librarian, working in dim lamplight, reshelving the books of the day with a quiet tenderness. Whatever the day carried, the librarian is sorting it now. Gently, without your supervision, you can let it work. You can let it rest you. Here is a final soft note on how deep this all goes. Neuroscience and animal cognition research suggests that the architecture of imagination predates human language by millions of years. Mammals dream. Birds engage in imaginative play. Octopuses appear to rehearse possibilities before acting. Default mode-like networks that allow for mental simulation appear in every vertebrate brain of sufficient complexity. Language came late. Imagination came first. The part of you that drifts tonight into soft inner scenes, is using machinery older than the first words any human ever spoke, machinery that has been dreaming on this planet for hundreds of millions of years. Sleeping cats twitch their paws as if running. Sleeping dogs whimper softly at unseen visions. Sleeping octopuses change color in slow waves, perhaps replaying the colors of the seafloor. Sleeping birds appear to rehearse their songs, neuron beneuron, in patterns that match the next morning's first notes. The night mind is not a human invention. It is a deep biological inheritance, older than fingers, older than warm blood, older than language by eons. You are part of that inheritance. And tonight you are simply doing what every dreaming creature has always done. You are drifting on a very old river, the same river your deepest ancestors knew. Its water is warm, and it has always known how to carry a quiet mind. There is nowhere you need to row to. There is no shore on the map. The current itself is the destination, and it is already moving you, gently, in the right direction. If you'd like, let the breath settle deeper into the chest. No hurry. Divergent thinking is the name psychologists give to the mind's ability to generate many possibilities from a single starting point. Guilford introduced the concept in the 1950s. The test is simple and kind. Take a common object, like a brick or a paper clip, and list every possible use. A person scoring low might list 5 or 10 standard uses. A person high in divergent thinking might list dozens, some practical, some playful, some absurd. The ability is not about intelligence in the testable sense. It's about mental flexibility, about allowing the imagination to not commit too quickly, about being at ease with possibility itself. Tonight, perhaps, you can practice a smaller kind of divergent thinking, letting each sound, each breath, each passing thought become many things, none of them needing to be chosen, all of them allowed to drift past gently. Here is a small, gentle demonstration of how flexible your mind can be. In a standard divergent thinking test, researchers give a participant a simple object. A paper clip is a common one, and ask them to list as many uses as they can. Most people start with the obvious ones: hold papers, pick a lock, scratch an itch. Then something soft happens. The mind, if allowed, begins to drift. A paperclip becomes a tiny bookmark, a dollhouse hanger, a fishing hook for a mouse, a bridge for an ant, a wire for a bird's nest. The more relaxed the participant, the more unusual and tender the answers become. It was never the object that was creative. It was the quiet space around it, and the gentle willingness to keep looking. Researchers sometimes time how long it takes participants to begin offering unusual answers. The pattern comes back consistent. The first 30 seconds bring conventional uses. The next 30 bring playful ones. After 2 minutes of soft attention, almost everyone begins to invent answers no one in the lab has ever heard before. The mind does not run out. The mind only needs time and a little permission. Perhaps every ordinary thing around you is waiting to be seen again. Gently, through the drifting eyes of sleep. Here is a quiet, 4-word question that researchers use to measure creative ability. The question is, what else could this be? It is the heart of divergent thinking tests, and it is also the heart of most creative practices throughout history. Artists ask it about a canvas. Composers ask it about a silence. Architects ask it about an empty lot. Children ask it hundreds of times a day. Often out loud. It is not a sophisticated question. It is not an advanced skill. It is a small, soft, continuous invitation. The mind gives itself the invitation to not settle yet, to keep the edges of things open, to look once more before deciding. You don't have to ask it tonight. The question is asking itself in the background, quietly, as your mind softens and the edges of everything blur towards sleep. Here is something gentle every parent or teacher has noticed. A child, asked what a cloud could be, might say a sheep, a ship, a big scoop of ice cream, a friend who can fly, the wind, taking a nap. Onaduit, asked the same question, tends to pause, filter through possibilities, and then offer one or two answers they feel confident about. The difference is not about intelligence. Research on creative development shows that adults have simply learned to suppress low-probability answers. Trained by years of schooling and social feedback to give the expected response, children, not yet fully trained into this filtering, produce many more low-probability answers, many of which are the seeds of creativity. Perhaps tonight, the filter can loosen a little. You don't have to give the expected answer to anything. You can let every thought become many clouds. This is one of the softer observations in developmental psychology. Ask a 5-year-old what an empty cardboard box is. You will rarely hear the word box. You will hear spaceship, cave, castle, sled, boat, submarine, time machine, secret fort. Developmental psychologists like Paul Harris have spent careers documenting this kind of play-based creativity. It is not fantasy escape. It is the cognitive ability to hold two frames at once, the real and the imagined, without forcing them to resolve. Every adult was once fluent in this skill. Most still carry a quiet trace of it in their dreams. Though they may not remember the fluency by morning, tonight, as your mind drifts, it may be returning to the language of boxes and spaceships, not childish, but the oldest fluent language the mind ever learned. Perhaps you can let the belly soften outward on the next exhale. Whenever it's ready, in a landmark long-term study, researchers George Land and Beth Jarman adapted a creativity test originally designed by NASA to identify innovative engineers. They gave the same test to children at age 5, then followed them to age 10, then 15, then 30. At age 5, 98% of the children scored in what the test defined as the genius range for divergent thinking. At age 10, only 30% did. By age 15, 12%. By age 30, only 2%. The researchers concluded that creativity at that level is not learned but unlearned. It was always there, simply quieted over time. The original test was designed to find adult engineers who could imagine entirely new categories of innovation, people whose minds could leap past convention and arrive at unexpected approaches. When given to children, it surfaced the same quality, but in nearly every child. The conclusion was as gentle as it was startling. Genius, by this particular measure, was not a rare gift. It was the human starting point. What changed across the years was not the mind. It was the room the mind was given to move in. Whatever the world taught you to hide, the quiet studio is still open tonight. You don't have to retrieve anything. You only have to let it return. Here is the kindest interpretation of the Land and Jarman findings. The 96% drop in divergent thinking score from 5 to 30 does not mean the creativity disappeared. In multiple follow-up studies, researchers found that adults could recover much of the earlier score simply by being placed in low-pressure, play-based conditions. Give an adult permission to be wrong. Give them an hour without judgment. Give them a quiet room and a simple prompt. And the scores begin to rise again. The creativity didn't vanish. It had been tucked away, under layers of acquired caution, waiting for the right soft conditions to return. That 5-year-old is still inside you, still seeing spaceships in boxes. Tonight is exactly the kind of quiet room where they gently come back. Here is a final, soft note to close this cluster. The newer thinking in creativity research, coming from scholars like Keith Sawyer and Beth Hennessy, suggests creativity is less a skill to be built and more a capacity to be remembered. Every human mind, they argue, comes equipped with combinatorial, associative, and imaginative machinery. What differs across lives is access, education, culture, stress, and habit can quietly close doors to this machinery, but none of them can remove the rooms behind those doors. Remembering, in this view, is the real creative act. Remembering you already knew how to make something from nothing. You are not learning anything tonight. You are remembering something old, a quiet knowledge your sleeping mind has never forgotten. The next cluster turns to a state that lives at the heart of so many creative practices, but turns out, beneath its name, to be far softer than most people expect. The state of flow. Here is what modern brain imaging has revealed about creative flow. For decades, psychologists described flow as intense absorption, getting lost in a task. It is that, but recent imaging work by Beatty, Cunhas, and others reveals a more delicate picture. Flow is a gentle dance between two brain systems. One is the default mode network, the one that wanders, drifts, and imagines. The other is the executive control network, the one that keeps soft watch, decides which ideas to keep, and gives shape to the drift. In flow, these two systems take turns with a smooth rhythm. Like two dancers who know each other so well, they don't need to speak. Flow is not a mountain to climb. It is a quiet partnership already happening inside you, most often without you noticing it at all. Let's stay with that dance for a moment longer. The default mode is the system that invents possibilities. It suggests. It wanders. It does not judge. The executive control system, anchored in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, is the gentle curator. It receives the wanderings and decides quietly, without cruelty, which ones to attend to. In states of anxiety, the curator becomes harsh and the wanderer grows silent. In states of effort, the curator dominates and creativity stalls. But in soft, unhurried rest, the two find their old rhythm. The wanderer offers a gift. The curator holds it gently. Another gift comes. Perhaps tonight, both parts of your mind have laid down their tools, and the dance has become simply breath. You might notice the feet, heavy and warm, whenever they are ready. When the two systems of flow share their rhythm smoothly, something measurable happens. Researchers see increased alpha-theta cross-frequency coupling in EEG studies, gentle increases in cortical blood flow, and small drops in stress hormone markers like cortisol. What the person feels, though, is nothing dramatic. Flow doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives as a quiet warmth rising in the chest. A feeling that time has gently changed shape. A sense of being carried by the work rather than carrying it. Often, people only notice they were in flow afterward. The way you notice you've been breathing slowly for a while. Perhaps you are in a very gentle flow right now, not of making anything outwardly, but of being carried softly towards sleep. Here is one of the most consistent findings in the flow research. Flow cannot be willed directly. The more you try to force it, the more the executive system tightens its grip and the default mode goes quiet. This is called the flow paradox. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who gave flow its name, described it as the result of balance, not pressure. Musicians who practice with soft curiosity report more flow than those who drill with tension. Writers who work in relaxed morning hours report more flow than those writing under deadline panic. The door to flow opens by being left gently unlocked, not by being kicked in. In studies of accomplished athletes, the same pattern appears. The most reliable flow comes after the warm-up is done with kindness, not strain. In studies of skilled chefs, the same again. The dishes that go best are the ones cooked from a calm body. The waking practice closest to flow is, in many ways, the practice closest to falling asleep. Both ask the same thing of you: stop reaching and let the room hold you. So perhaps, if you'd like, release any small pressure to sleep well tonight. Sleep opens the same kind of door quietly, only to those who stop knocking. Here is a gentle piece of data for the feeling of being in flow. In studies measuring brain activity during flow states, from jazz improvisation to video game play to mathematical problem solving, researchers consistently observe a specific pattern: a quiet decrease in activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the inner critic in plain language, paired with increased connectivity between the default mode and sensory regions. This is why flow feels like being carried. The inner judge has softened, and the inner weaver has opened windows. The outside world flows in more freely, not less. People in flow often describe heightened sensory clarity alongside deep mental ease. Perhaps your inner judge is softening right now. Perhaps the windows are slowly opening inside you to the gentle sounds of the evening. This is a gentle surprise to many people. Common intuition suggests that musicians in flow, especially those improvising, must be intensely focused and tightly controlled. The brain data tells another story. Studies by Charles Lim at Johns Hopkins, scanning jazz pianists mid-improvisation, found that the default mode network actually increased activity during improvisation, not decreased. The self-monitoring regions quieted. The wandering, associative, memory-rich regions lit up. The musicians were, in a sense, dreaming while awake, letting the mind drift through chords and feelings, trusting the executive system to simply shape the drift into sound. Perhaps creativity is less about control than we were taught. Perhaps it is closer to the softness of dreaming, and tonight, you are moving toward the deeper form of it. This is worth repeating because it gently contradicts popular images of creativity. Hollywood and advertising often picture creative flow as frenetic, wild writing. Paint-splattered walls, eyes wide, with inspiration. The actual physiology is almost the opposite. Flow states show lowered heart rate variability toward a steady middle range, reduced cortisol, and increased parasympathetic nervous activity. In plain terms, the body is deeply calm. The mind is quietly alert. The feeling is not adrenaline. It is a soft, glowing calm, a kind of alert warmth that doesn't demand anything from the body. Many people describe it as peaceful, not thrilling, so perhaps this evening's soft, slow arrival is closer to real creative flow than any frantic moment of effort you have ever had. Maybe the eyelids grow a little heavier. You don't have to keep them open. Researchers who study flow entry have noted a gentle paradox in the practitioners who reach it most reliably. These people step back, not forward. They relax the body first. They lower expectations. They allow the first minutes of a session to be soft, exploratory, unjudged. They treat the first bad note as a normal part of tuning. They let the mind know, quietly, that it is safe to wander. Only then do they begin. Flow doesn't arrive because they demanded it. It arrives because they prepared a soft room and waited kindly at the door. Some practitioners describe a kind of inner gardening before any creative session. They tidy the desk a little, not to be neat, but to make the space feel ready. They make a small cup of something warm. They set the lamp to a low setting. They breathe out, more than once. None of these gestures produce flow directly. They simply create the conditions in which flow might choose to visit. The visit, when it comes, is always a guest, never a captive. Perhaps tonight you are preparing a soft room for flow, or for sleep, or both at once. Either is welcome. Either will come when it wants. Here is something measurable that happens as you soften into rest. When you close your eyes in a quiet room, within about 10 to 15 seconds, a particular brainwave pattern rises in the back of your head. Electroencephalogram recordings show a dominant frequency between 8 and 12 cycles per second, gentle, rhythmic, regular. This is the alpha rhythm. It was first described by Hans Berger, a German neurologist, in 1929. He called it the alpha wave because it was the very first wave he discovered. For many hours of your life, this is the rhythm your brain prefers when it is at ease. Perhaps your alpha is rising right now, quietly, in the back of your head. You do not need to hear it. It is humming, gently, as it has hummed 1,000 evenings before this one. Let's linger a moment on that rhythm. 8 to 12 cycles per second is a slow, even pulse. It is slower than the beta rhythms of focused attention. 13 to 30 cycles. Slower than the gamma rhythms of intense cognition. Above 30, it is faster than the theta rhythms of drowsiness. 4 to 7. Slower than the rapid thoughts of planning. Alpha sits in the gentle middle, the rhythm of relaxed alertness. If you could hear it, it would sound like a very soft heartbeat, only slightly slower than the one in your chest. 2 quiet pulses breathing together. Inside you, 2 quiet pulses, breathing in time, the heart and the alpha both carrying you. without asking anything from you. The mind has a special rhythm for looking inward. Alpha has a special relationship with attention. When attention turns outward toward a screen, a task, a threat, alpha power drops. When attention turns inward toward a memory, an imagined scene, a daydream, alpha power rises. Often strongly, this is one of the most reliable findings in cognitive neuroscience. Research by Fink and Benedek gathered decades of this work together in 2014, showing that alpha functions as a kind of internal search beam when the mind is looking inside itself for something new. Alpha is the soft light it uses to see by two. Tonight, your mind's attention is turning very gently inward. The alpha light is rising to help it see by a softer lamp. This is one of the most stable findings in the creativity literature. When scientists ask people to generate original ideas, new uses for an object, an alternative ending to a story, a possible solution to a puzzle, they see alpha power rise in the frontal and parietal areas of the brain. The rise is stronger for more original ideas than for obvious ones. People who tend to score high on creativity tests often show a stronger baseline alpha even when they are not doing a creative task. It is as if the creative mind keeps a soft internal lamp burning all the time, ready for the next original thought whenever it wants to appear. Researchers describe the lamp metaphor without irony. Alpha appears to function as a kind of internal illumination, dimming the noise from outside so the inner room can be seen more clearly. The brighter your alpha lamp, the more you can read by it, and the lamp does not need a switch. It rises and falls on its own as your attention drifts inward and back out again. All evening long, your inner lamp is glowing tonight. Softly, whether or not any idea steps into its light, the lamp is enough by itself. Maybe the fingers curl a little, or unjurl, whichever feels like rest. In 2015, Caroline Lustenberger and colleagues at the University of North Carolina performed a careful experiment. Using a technique called transcranial alternating current stimulation, they gently stimulated the frontal cortex at exactly 10 Hz, the heart of the alpha band. The stimulation was so mild, most participants could barely feel it. Yet creativity scores afterward rose significantly compared to sham controls. The finding was the first to show that alpha is not only correlated with creativity, it is causally connected. Gently tune the alpha rhythm, and the creative mind lifts. No one is tuning anything inside you tonight. The tuning is happening on its own, as the alpha rises with the soft closing of the day. This is a metaphor researchers themselves have used. In a review paper on alpha oscillations, one researcher described alpha as the brain humming to itself. The image is apt. Humming is what we do when we are relaxed, when we are internally occupied, when we are gently doing something with part of our attention while another part rests. Alpha is the same. It is not inattention. It is not sleep. It is the brain in a soft, self-engaged, internally oriented state, quietly producing its own gentle melody while the outer world settles down. Many of your best ideas arrived during these humming minutes of your life. Perhaps your brain is humming right now, a melody older than you are, with no words, but always the same soft shape of a lullaby. Here is a gentle convergence between ancient practice and modern science. EEG, studies of experienced meditators in Zen, Vipassana, transcendental meditation, and other contemplative traditions consistently find increased alpha power during meditation. Studies of the pre-sleep moments, the minutes before you drift off, they show the same alpha rise. The rhythm that contemplatives spent decades cultivating intentionally is the same rhythm your brain produces every night, quite naturally. As you prepare to sleep, the practitioners call it stillness. The scientists call it alpha. They are describing the same soft waterfall, one in old language and one in new. Tonight, you are entering that practice without having to try. Every evening, the stillness comes for you on its own, simply because you are willing to receive it. A small, true thing to carry toward the next cluster. If you have been listening to these facts with eyes soft or closed, in a quiet room, with the body relaxed, then your occipital alpha power is almost certainly elevated right now compared to an hour ago. This is not speculation. It is a simple physiological fact, documented in thousands of EEG recordings. The conditions around you are shaping the rhythm inside you. You did not have to work for this. You did not have to earn it. You simply allowed the quiet to arrive, and your brain, on its own, began to hum in the creative register. You are already in the rhythm tonight. Nothing more is needed. The humming will carry you gently onward. The next cluster turns to one of the quietest, most extraordinary doorways the human mind crosses every night, a brief threshold between waking and sleep that creators across centuries have known by feel, and that science has only recently learned to name. Here is a quiet introduction to one of the most extraordinary phases of the mind. Between fully awake and fully asleep, there is a short passage your brain crosses every single night. Sleep scientists call it stage 1, or non-sleep. It lasts only a few minutes before deeper sleep takes over. For most of the 20th century, Stage 1 was considered a minor transitional stage, not worth studying in its own right. But recent research has revealed that Stage 1 is one of the most creatively fertile states the human brain ever enters. It is a doorway, and not just a doorway to sleep, but to a kind of thinking available nowhere else. Tonight, you will cross that doorway, perhaps more than once. You won't remember it, but your creativity will. Perhaps the small muscles between the eyebrows can soften now. If they want to, the old Greek-rooted name for the threshold between waking and sleep is Hypnagogia. Writers and artists have mentioned it for centuries. The drifting images, the half-dreams, the strange associations that appear when the eyes are closed, but sleep has not fully arrived. In 2023, a team led by Delphine Lecoq, working in Paris, published a landmark study showing that even a brief 1-minute dip into stage 1 hypnagogia, while holding a problem gently in mind, tripled the rate at which participants later discovered hidden solutions. The old doorway had a scientific name, and now it had scientific evidence. The stage 1 phase, by the way, is not rare or hard to reach. Every healthy sleeper passes through it within the first few minutes of beginning to drift. Most adults cross it dozens of times a year, sometimes briefly, in afternoon naps, sometimes for longer stretches in the soft minutes before deeper sleep arrives. It is not a special skill. It is one of the most ordinary parts of being a person, even though, until recently, almost no one knew it had a name at all. You are standing near that doorway right now. Tonight, as every night, it will open for you quietly, without a sound. Here is what happens inside the Stage 1 doorway. Neurologically speaking, during Stage 1, the brain enters a particular in-between pattern. Alpha waves slow, theta waves rise. The prefrontal cortex, the inner judge, begins to quiet, but the sensory cortices remain active. So, images and sounds continue to arise. The result is a brief, rich state in which the mind is not bound by logic, but is not yet dreaming either. In this window, researchers have measured a sharp rise in unusual word associations, a softening of the normal filters between ideas, and a willingness to let impossible things combine. A pencil that grows leaves, a road that hums, a memory that belongs to someone else. The combinations are not chosen. They simply appear, like weather. And because the inner judge has gone quieter, none of them are dismissed before they finish forming. The mind in Stage 1 is unusually generous to itself. It accepts every small offering, even the strange ones, even the ones that will never be useful. This generosity is part of what makes the doorway so creatively rich. Nothing is being thrown away yet. These combinations are not errors. They are how creativity is born, and they are already beginning inside you tonight. Here is one of the oldest creative practices, now supported by modern data. Thomas Edison, the American inventor, used to sit in a chair with a steel ball in each hand. Beneath each hand, he placed a metal pan. As he drifted towards sleep, his hands would relax. The steel balls would fall. The clang of metal would wake him. He would quickly write down whatever images, words, or ideas had been drifting through his mind in the final soft minutes before the fall. Many of his most useful insights, he claimed, arrived this way. For nearly a century, this was treated as eccentric. Recent research now suggests Edison was simply and intuitively harvesting the creative riches of Stage 1. You don't need a steel ball tonight. Your mind will remember what it wants to remember. The rest can sleep. Here is a painter who used almost the same method as Edison. The Spanish painter Salvador Dalí wrote about what he called sleeping with a key. He would sit in a chair, holding a metal key between his thumb and index finger, with a plate on the floor below. As he drifted towards sleep, the muscles of his hand would relax, and the key would drop onto the plate, waking him instantly. In the few seconds before the fall, Dalí later wrote, his mind would fill with images he could not have invented awake: the melting clocks, the long-legged elephants, the floating figures that later became his most famous paintings. He, too, was harvesting Stage 1. Tonight, no key is needed. The images can come, and the images can go, and you can simply let the night keep them all for you. Here is the 2023 study that gave these old methods their evidence. In the study by Delphine Lecoq and colleagues at the Paris Brain Institute, participants were given a difficult mathematical puzzle that had a hidden shortcut they were not told about. Then they were asked to rest quietly for 20 minutes. Some were kept awake. Others were allowed to drift briefly into Stage 1. Those who reached Stage 1 for at least 1 minute discovered the hidden shortcut almost 3 times more often than those who stayed awake or fell into deeper sleep. Stage 1, and only Stage 1, produced the effect. The doorway, it turned out, has its own gift. You don't have to carry any puzzle tonight. If the doorway wants to give you something, it will. And if not, rest is its own quiet answer. Perhaps the legs, long and heavy, can rest a little more deeply now. When sleep researchers look at the EEG pattern of stage 1, they see something beautiful. The steady alpha rhythm of quiet wakefulness begins to break apart. In its place, slow theta waves appear, mixed with small bursts and drifting ripples, like a calm pond into which something very small has fallen. The pattern is not noisy. It is not sleepy in the heavy sense. It is a kind of soft, patterned, dissolving the shape of a mind that is releasing the day without yet becoming a dream. Some scientists call it the rippling mind. Perhaps your mind is rippling now, not loud, not frightening, only the soft spreading rings of a small quiet stone dropped into warm water. Here is a gentle practical note from sleep science. Most of the creative practices known to humans, meditation, walks in nature, showers, long drives take minutes to hours to produce their creative effects. Stage 1 is different. The Lecoq study and others show that even a brief 1-minute window of stage 1 is enough to measurably shift creative performance. It is, in a sense, the shortest natural creative retreat the human brain offers us. It comes free. Every night, most people have crossed it thousands of times without knowing it existed, carrying through its soft doorway whatever gift it chose to give them. Some of those gifts surface as feelings rather than thoughts. A small clarity in the morning, a softer mood, a faint sense of having understood something you had been turning over for days. These, too, are the doorway's offerings. They simply travel quietly. Without announcement, the doorway never insists that you notice it. It only insists, in its own gentle way, on opening every single night. Tonight you are crossing it again. You don't have to watch for it. The doorway will take care of itself. Here is a very old human observation, waiting all this time for its science. The word hypnagogia was coined in the 1800s, but the experience was described long before. Aristotle wrote about the vivid images that appear between waking and sleep. Medieval mystics described them as soul images. Poets have described them as doorway visions. Now, brain imaging confirms that during this period, sensory regions remain active, while executive regions quiet, producing a brief, rich visual and auditory theater for which no outside stimulus exists. It is not a hallucination. It is not a dream. It is the oldest, smallest show your mind puts on every single evening of your life. Perhaps the show is beginning for you now. You don't have to watch. The pictures can play without anyone in the seats. Here is a final gentle thought before we leave this cluster. Across history, many creators have kept a small pad near the bed to write down images and phrases that arrive in the doorway. Mary Shelley did this. Paul McCartney did. Sylvia Plath did. Scientists sometimes did too. Otto Loewi scribbled the design of a Nobel-winning experiment on a scrap of paper he kept by his pillow. After it came to him in a half-dream, you don't have to keep a pad tonight, but it's useful to know. If an image comes in this soft window, it may be the evening giving you a gift, and gifts can always be received quietly. Even if you never unwrap them, whatever arrives tonight, let it come. Whatever leaves, Let it leave. The doorway takes care of all of it. Kindly, whether or not you are watching, the next cluster turns toward the longer stretches of the night, when the brain begins its softer, slower work, the patient weaving that gives sleep its hidden creative power. Here is one of the most elegant functions of the sleeping brain. All through the night, as you sleep, your brain is not simply resting. It is performing a kind of invisible weaving. Memories from the day are reactivated in brief, high-speed bursts. They are then woven together with older memories, with emotional traces, with fragments of things you read or imagined. This process is called memory consolidation. But the word understates what happens. It is not just storing, it is pattern finding. The brain is looking, quietly, for threads between ideas that may not have looked connected during the day. Many of these threads become tomorrow's insights. The loom is already moving inside you tonight. You don't have to guide it. You only have to let it work in the dark. Perhaps the arms, resting at your sides. We can let go of one more small effort. Of all the sleep stages, REM, rapid eye movement, sleep, seems especially important for creative association. During REM, the brain shows high activity in regions linked to emotion, memory, and imagery, while the regions that maintain logical filtering remain quiet. This produces a peculiar cognitive environment in which very distantly related ideas can be brought together without resistance. A bird and a prayer, a number and a scent, a lost friend and a new question. These pairings, laid quietly down during REM, are often what we later call creative leaps, though the brain simply calls them weaving. Tonight the weaver will come. Your arms are already heavy enough to let the work begin. Here is one of the most cited studies in creativity and sleep. In 2009, Denise Kai and colleagues at the University of California, San Diego, asked participants to work on a difficult associative task, finding a single word that connected three seemingly unrelated words. A classic creativity test. Then, participants were split into three groups. One group rested quietly without sleeping. One napped, but stayed in light sleep. One napped long enough to enter REM. Only the REM group showed a significant improvement afterward, in fact. They nearly tripled their creative performance on the remaining items. REM was the active ingredient, and REM alone. The improvement was not subtle. Participants who had reached REM during the nap solved nearly 40% more associative items than those who had only quiet rest, and showed a clear pattern of finding answers that drew on the priming material in unexpected, sideways ways. The waking mind would have rejected those connections. The REM mind welcomed them. By the time the participants opened their eyes, the bridges had already been built. Tonight, REM will find you several times, quietly, without an appointment. Whatever it decides to weave for you will be yours in the morning. Here is what makes REM weaving different from waking thought. During waking hours, your frontal cortex maintains a careful filter. It keeps conversations on topic, keeps thoughts orderly, keeps you from blurting out strange associations in a meeting. During REM, this filter relaxes dramatically. Studies by Robert Stickgold and Matthew Walker have shown that the sleeping brain preferentially connects ideas with weaker rather than stronger associative links. This is the opposite of the waking brain. At night, the far apart things come together. The bridges are gentle, tentative, and often wrong, but sometimes one of them is exactly the bridge your waking self needed. Tonight, far apart things are finding each other inside you. Let them meet. Kindly, without your supervision. Here is another landmark study, worth holding gently. In 2004, a research team, led by Ulrich Wagner, gave participants a difficult number puzzle that had a hidden shortcut they were not told about. Participants practiced, then were split into 3 groups: an awake group, a daytime nap group, and a full night of sleep group. 12 hours later, the full night sleep group was more than twice as likely to spontaneously discover the hidden shortcut as the awake group. The sleepers had found something the waking minds had not, and they had found it. It seemed, during sleep itself. Sleep, the study suggested, inspires insight. Tonight your mind will go looking for bridges you didn't know you needed. It doesn't need your help. It only needs your permission. Here is what dream content analysis consistently finds. Studies that collect and analyze dream reports from thousands of participants across cultures find that dreams are overwhelmingly concerned with ongoing concerns, things you're working on, unresolved conversations, unanswered questions, lingering worries. This is not mere rehashing. Dream researchers like Ernest Hartman and Deirdre Barrett have argued that the dreaming brain is, in part, a problem workshop. It tries new configurations. It tests small combinations. Most are forgotten by morning, but some of them survive, sometimes as a feeling, sometimes as a specific image, sometimes as an answer that was not there the night before. Whatever you've been gently holding, the workshop will receive it tonight. You don't have to hand it over. It will simply be taken, softly. Perhaps the jaw can soften one more time, the small hinge, letting go. Most people have had the experience of going to bed, confused about something, and waking up, knowing the decision clearer, the sentence written, the direction obvious. This is not magic. Sleep scientists have documented the effect carefully. Participants who sleep on a problem solve it more often, and often describe the solution as arriving without effort, as if they had simply remembered something. This experience has a quiet name, the overnight insight effect. It is so reliable that some creative professionals have made it a formal part of their process, entrusting difficult problems to the evening rather than the day. Writers like John Steinbeck have described the practice plainly. A difficult passage that resisted all evening seems almost easy by morning. Steinbeck wrote, "The gentle implication, supported by current research, is that the night had already done some of the work." Steinbeck did not have to revise the passage so much as receive the version his sleeping mind had quietly drafted while he was elsewhere. Many writers, scientists, and decision-makers have come to expect this kind of overnight assistance, and to plan their hardest thinking around it. Whatever you have been working on, tonight you can hand to the night. The night will carry it without effort. That is what nights are for. Here is a beautiful continuity across cultures. Many cultures have formal traditions of dream incubation, asking a dream for an answer to a question. Ancient Greeks slept in the temples of Asclepius to receive healing dreams. Tibetan monks practiced dream yoga to gain insight. Indigenous traditions across the Americas have described seeking dreams for guidance. Modern research on dream incubation, notably by Deirdre Barrett at Harvard, has found that participants who gently frame a question before sleep do, in fact, report more dreams related to that question than control groups. The old practice has modest but real modern evidence. The night really does listen. You don't have to ask anything tonight. If you do, the night may listen. And if you don't, the night will still be kind. Here is how this cluster and the previous one connect. Stage 1, the gentle doorway near the start of sleep, and REM, the deeper weaving stage that comes later, are two different creative instruments the brain uses every night. Stage 1 offers brief, vivid, loosely coupled imagery ideal for sparks. REM offers longer, richer, more emotionally connected associations, ideal for integration. Neither is better. They work in sequence. The sparks of stage 1 can become the threads of REM. The threads of REM can return to stage 1 as new images the next night. Across a single night of sleep, your creative mind gets to use both instruments. Many times, both instruments are already tuning inside you tonight. No one is playing them. They know their own song. Here is one more thing sleep researchers notice about dream weaving. The problem solving that happens in REM is rarely aggressive. It does not push through walls. It does not demand answers. It tries, softly, to find new shapes. If a shape works, it stays. If not, it is released. There is no scolding inside the night. There is no deadline. This, according to some researchers, is precisely why sleep is so good at creativity. The waking mind is often too harsh on new ideas to let them develop. The sleeping mind is not harsh. It receives every suggestion, however strange, with the same gentle willingness. Perhaps your own evening is like that, right now. No pushing, no scolding, simply a soft willingness to let the night try whatever it wants to try. The next cluster moves into a small gallery of the most famous dreams in the history of human creativity, the dreams that became sciences, songs, novels, and inventions, not as a way to compare yourself to anyone, only as a quiet reminder that the same kind of night you are entering tonight has carried other people, in other centuries, into ideas the world had been waiting for. Here is one of the most famous creative dreams in the history of science. In 1869, the Russian chemist Dmitri Mendeleev had been struggling for years to organize the known chemical elements into a coherent arrangement. He had been playing with cards bearing the element names, trying different orders. One evening, exhausted, he fell asleep at his desk. He later wrote, "I saw in a dream a table where all elements fell into place as required." On waking, he immediately wrote it down. That dream arrangement became the periodic table, the organizing principle of modern chemistry. An entire science now rests on what arrived, unbidden. In an evening's sleep, tonight, something far smaller but no less, yours may be arranging itself. You will not see the table. You will simply wake, and the pieces will have found their places. Perhaps the shoulders, warm and heavy now, can let one more layer of tension dissolve. The German chemist Friedrich Kekulé had been struggling for years to understand the structure of benzene, a molecule whose properties did not match any known arrangement. In 1862, sitting by his fire, he drifted into a dream. He saw atoms linked in chains, the chains twisting like snakes. Then one snake seized its own tail and began to rotate. Kekulivok drew the image and proposed the benzene ring, a ring-shaped molecule, the first ever suggested. It was correct. Much of organic chemistry was built on that dreamt snake. Later, Kekule said, "Let us learn to dream." Gentlemen, and then perhaps we shall find the truth. He spoke those words at a scientific congress, surrounded by the most rigorous minds of his century. He was not romanticizing the night. He was naming, plainly, the part of the creative process every working scientist already knew but rarely admitted aloud, that some answers were waiting in the wrong place to be found by daylight. And the only way to reach them was through the soft, unguarded territory of sleep. Let us learn to sleep. 2. Your dream tonight does not have to be useful. It only has to be yours. Here is a creative dream from outside the sciences. In 1963, in a small room in London, Paul McCartney woke from a dream with a full melody in his head. He went to the piano and played it. It was so complete, so clean, that he was convinced it must be an old song he had unconsciously remembered. For weeks, he asked friends and colleagues if they recognized it. None of them did. Eventually, believing it really was his own, he set lyrics to it. The song became Yesterday, one of the most recorded songs in the history of music. Its melody arrived whole, in a dream, asking only to be written down. Not every dream gives a melody, but tonight's dream gives something, always, perhaps only a warmth, perhaps only a feeling, perhaps only rest itself. Here is a creative dream from literature. In 1816, during a rainy summer at the Villa Diodati in Switzerland, Mary Shelley and her companions challenged each other to write ghost stories. For days, Shelley could think of nothing. Then one night, unable to sleep, she drifted into the hypnagogic state. She later wrote that she saw, with eyes closed and inner eyes open, the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. The image was so vivid, she could not forget it. The next morning she began to write. That half-dream image became Frankenstein, a novel that helped invent science fiction and has been in print continuously for 200 years. Your inner eyes may be opening gently tonight too. Whatever they see is allowed to be yours, even if you never tell anyone what it was. Here is a dream that changed how the world was clothed. In 1845, the American inventor Elias Howe had nearly given up on his sewing machine. He could not figure out where to place the hole through which the thread should pass. One night he dreamt he was captured by a tribe whose warriors carried spears. In the dream, he noticed that each spear had a hole near its tip, not at its base. He woke with a start and realized the needle's eye must be near the point, not the other end. That single insight made the sewing machine possible. The entire modern clothing industry rests on a dream of spears. The dream showed him something he could not see awake. Your dream may show you something too tonight, or some other night. It is not a demand, only a possibility. Here is a dream from the very foundations of modern physics. The Danish physicist Niels Bohr, while developing his model of the atom in 1913, had a dream. He saw himself standing at the center of a solar system, with planets connected to him by thin threads, revolving around him. On waking, He used the image to propose that electrons orbit the atomic nucleus in fixed paths, the model that became the foundation for quantum physics. He later won the Nobel Prize. Much of 20th century science came, in part, from a man who dreamt of planets tied to him by string. The sky above you is quiet tonight. Perhaps a small solar system is drifting, in miniature, inside your head, soft, orderly, turning on its own. Perhaps the small place between your eyebrows and hairline can soften one more time. In 1921, the Austrian physiologist Otto Lowy had been trying for years to prove that nerves communicated through chemical signals, not only electrical ones. He could not design a clean experiment. One night, he dreamt the exact setup: 2 frog hearts in 2 dishes, connected by a tube of fluid, the signal from one traveling to the other. He woke, scribbled it on a pad, and fell asleep again. In the morning, he could not read his own handwriting. The next night, the dream returned. This time he went straight to his lab and performed the experiment. It worked. He later received the Nobel Prize in Physiology for a dream he almost forgot. Lowy told the story for the rest of his life with a kind of wry tenderness. The first night, he wrote, the dream was a stranger knocking at his door with a gift, and he could not understand the language on the wrapping paper. The second night, the stranger came back, more patient this time, and waited until he had time to listen properly. Many great discoveries, Lowy suggested. Maybe travelers like this, visiting twice, 3 times, until the recipient finally has a quiet enough room to receive them. If you forget tonight's dream, that is all right. The night does not measure itself by what you remember. It measures itself by the quiet it gives you. Here is one of the softest origin stories in modern physics. Albert Einstein often said that his theory of relativity began not with equations, but with what he called the happiest thought of his life. It came to him in a reverie. While he was daydreaming at his patent office desk in Bern, he imagined a man falling from a rooftop and realized that, while falling, the man would feel no gravity. The thought was not logical in the usual sense. It was an image soft, visual, almost dreamlike. From that image, through many years of careful mathematics, grew general relativity. The theory that reshaped our understanding of space and time began, essentially, as a daydream at a quiet desk. Einstein returned to the image, which he called a thought experiment. Again and again across his career, he felt the weight of the theory was carried by the image, not the math. The math came later, slowly, sometimes painfully. The image, by contrast, had simply arrived, gentle and complete. On a quiet afternoon, when nothing important was being demanded of him, your quiet evening is not so different from that desk in Bern. The world pauses. The mind drifts. Something small can arrive. Here is one of the most mysterious creative stories in mathematics. Srinivasa Ramanujan, the Indian mathematician who lived from 1887 to 1920, had no formal training beyond high school, yet he produced thousands of mathematical formulas, many of which took decades after his death to prove. He said that these formulas were brought to him in his sleep by his family goddess, Namagiri. He would wake with equations inscribed on his tongue, which he then wrote down, T, H, Harde. the Cambridge mathematician who worked with Ramanujan, never quite knew what to make of these stories. But he acknowledged that Ramanujan's mathematical mind, whatever its source, was among the most extraordinary he had ever encountered. Whatever your night brings or does not bring, the fact that minds like this one existed is a gentle proof the night is generous, sometimes in ways we cannot explain. Here is a creative dream from the present day. In 2003, Stephanie Meyer, a 30-year-old mother in Arizona, had a vivid dream. In a sunlit meadow, a beautiful boy, whose skin glittered softly in the light, was explaining to a girl that he was a vampire. The conversation was gentle, tender, and unusually detailed. When Maya woke, she could not stop thinking about the image. She began writing it down that day. The scene became Chapter 13 of Twilight, a novel that has since sold more than 160 million copies. The image that began it all had simply arrived, quietly, in a single ordinary dream. An ordinary dream can change a life. Even if tonight's dream changes nothing at all, it is still an offering. That is already enough. Here is a quiet observation from developmental psychology. When psychologists observe children at play, they notice that a child holding a wooden block is often simultaneously holding many other things: a car, a phone, a sandwich, a spaceship. The child moves fluidly between these identities, never confusing them, never feeling contradiction. Alison Gopnik and other developmental researchers have called this symbolic play. It is the foundation of imagination. Adults rarely do it anymore. Not because they have grown out of the ability, but because they have stopped practicing. The capacity, though, remains. It wakes up in dreams, in daydreams, in the softest minutes before sleep. A piece of that child is playing with the edge of your blanket right now, turning it into something else, for no reason at all. Perhaps the chest rises and falls a little more softly now. With that thought, studies on what psychologists call continuity of self across the lifespan consistently find that the imaginative patterns of early childhood, the readiness to play, the willingness to combine unlike things, the soft delight in nonsense, never actually disappear. They simply go quieter as adult responsibilities take the foreground. In older adults who practice creative activities, these patterns often return almost unchanged. The inner child is not a nostalgic concept. It is a measurable cognitive pattern, still alive inside the grown-up mind, waiting for the kind of quiet evening that invites it back out. Studies on play in older adults consistently find the same effect. Given a room with simple materials, clay, paper, music, soft light, and given permission to do nothing in particular, adults of all ages will eventually begin to play, and their play will look, on close observation, remarkably like the play of small children. The forms repeat. Some patterns of imagination are simply human patterns, not stages we leave behind. Tonight is exactly that kind of evening. The child is already standing in the doorway, wondering softly if it is safe to come back inside. Here is a gentle finding from adult creativity research. In multiple studies comparing adults who engage regularly in playful activities, games, improv, casual art, storytelling, to adults who do not, the playful adults show consistently higher scores on divergent thinking and original problem solving. The effect is not small. Some studies find differences of 30 to 40%. The direction of causality is still being studied, but the relationship is robust. Play is not the opposite of serious work. It is, in many ways, the ground on which serious creative work quietly grows. You don't have to play tonight. Sleep itself is a very quiet form of play, in which the mind tries shapes it would not try while awake. Here is a lovely finding from effective neuroscience. When researchers scan the brain of someone who is deeply curious, they see activation patterns in the reward system, the same regions lit up by small pleasures like music or a piece of chocolate. Curiosity is, neurologically, a form of pleasure. This is why children, with their abundant curiosity, often seem to be enjoying the world more richly than adults do. Their brains are rewarding them for looking at ordinary things with fresh attention. Adults can still do this. It tends to happen most easily in states of low pressure on vacations, in quiet rooms, and in the moments before sleep. Perhaps a small curiosity is still awake in you tonight. Perhaps it is simply wondering what the next sentence will say. That wondering is already a pleasure. Here is something adults often need to hear. In a study on expert scientists, the researcher Stuart Firestein at Columbia University found that the scientists themselves valued not knowing above knowing. A question is more productive than an answer. Not knowing keeps the search alive. Children, who not know almost everything, are in a sense expert creators by default. Adults, who have accumulated many answers, sometimes have to work to reclaim the softer state of not knowing. Bedtime, with its natural loosening of certainty, is one of the places where adults can quietly re-enter the creative not knowing of childhood. Tonight, you don't need to know anything. You only need to rest. The not knowing will do its own quiet, creative work. Here is a name from Zen Buddhism that fits modern creativity research. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki wrote in The Beginner's Mind, "There are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." Modern creativity research has independently arrived at the same idea. People who can suspend their expertise, who can approach a problem as if for the first time, tend to generate more original solutions. Engineers who remember how the problem looked before they were engineers. Writers who remember how the story felt before they knew the craft. This suspension is not loss of knowledge. It is softening around it. Perhaps tonight, your knowledge can soften a little. You don't have to forget anything. You only have to let everything breathe. Perhaps the feet, deeply heavy now, can rest one more layer down. Unlike attention, which fatigues, and like curiosity, which rests and returns, wonder appears to be a renewable cognitive resource. Studies on awe and wonder, notably by Dacher Keltner and colleagues, have found that people who regularly experience wonder through nature, art, music, or quiet observation tend to show lower stress markers, more creative output, and more willingness to consider ideas outside their comfort zone. Wonder does not deplete with use. It deepens. A child's inexhaustible wonder is not only charming, it is an adaptive design, and adults can keep it all their lives. Tonight, wonder is gently sitting at the edge of your bed, waiting to be renewed by simple rest. Here is a soft note to close this cluster. Picasso famously said, "It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child." The statement is often quoted, but its depth is usually missed. Picasso was not romanticizing childhood. He was naming something real in creative craft. Every mature creative act contains, somewhere within it, the freshness of a child's way of seeing, the sculptor who can cut stone like no one else, the mathematician who can simplify a theorem to a single line, the musician who can hold a note longer than seems possible. Somewhere inside each of them, the child is still at the easel, asking the old, quiet question, what else could this be? That question is already inside you, awake and kind, and in no hurry tonight. The next cluster turns to one of the gentlest reframes in the whole creativity literature, the idea that rest itself, far from being the opposite of creative work, is its quieter, deeper half. Whenever you're ready, we'll move into it softly. Here is a frame that creativity research has slowly been building for most of industrial history. Rest was defined as the opposite of work. Time off, time away. Recent neuroscience has quietly undone this framing. The brain during rest is not off. It is running the default mode network, integrating memories, forming new associations, revising understandings. In many measurable ways, the brain is as busy during rest as during task. The difference is the kind of work. Rest is the inner, integrative, slower work the brain does on its own, by itself, for itself. Without it, the outer work falls apart. With it, the outer work has somewhere to land. Tonight's rest is not a subtraction from your life. It is a quiet addition, happening inside you, whether you watch or not. Here is an idea that surprises many adults when they first meet it. In studies by Sandy Mann and others, participants asked to do a boring task before a creativity test, for example. Copying phone numbers out of a directory for 15 minutes scored significantly higher on subsequent creative measures than participants who were kept busy or entertained. Boredom, it turns out, is not a problem. It is a doorway. A mildly bored mind begins to wander, begins to imagine, begins to invent small stories to entertain itself. This inner wandering is the raw material of creativity. What our culture has been teaching children to avoid may be exactly what their creative minds most need. Tonight, a small, soft boredom may be part of the quiet. It is not a problem. It is an invitation. Here is a study you may find strangely comforting at bedtime. In 2014, Marilia Pezzo and Daniel Schwartz at Stanford asked participants to generate novel uses for common objects sitting still, walking indoors, walking outdoors, or sitting outdoors afterward. The walkers, both indoors and outdoors, produced nearly twice as many creative ideas as the sitters. The effect persisted briefly, even after the walk ended. Something about the gentle, rhythmic movement of walking, mild effort, steady pace, low cognitive demand seems to open a small inner channel. Lying still in bed is, in some respects, a similar channel. Quiet rhythm, low demand, softly opening doors. The walking effect, by the way, did not depend on scenery. Indoor walking on a treadmill produced almost the same boost as outdoor walking. The body, it seemed, was not asking for novelty. It was asking for movement at a soft pace. The breath in your chest tonight, slow and even, is the same kind of soft pace, only smaller. The cradle of the body is already rocking the mind, gently, even though nothing outwardly is moving at all. Your breath tonight is its own kind of walking. It carries you softly through an inner landscape you didn't have to plan. Perhaps the hands, warm and still, can rest a little more softly now. Studies on restorative rest consistently find that the quality of rest depends less on duration and more on permission. Participants instructed to rest without any agenda, no meditation goals, no productivity. No rules show better recovery on cognitive and creative measures than participants asked to rest with a specific protocol. The mind recovers most deeply when it is simply allowed to be. No posture is required. No technique is necessary. Only a kind of inner willingness to let the day stop without being inspected. Tonight, nothing is required of you. Not effort, not correctness, not measurement. The night is already giving you back to yourself. Kindly. Here is a pattern that emerges in interviews with accomplished creators. When researchers interview creative professionals, writers, scientists, designers, composers, a consistent rhythm appears in their descriptions. Bursts of focused work, long quiet gaps, walks, naps, showers, staring out windows, driving without the radio on. These gaps are not interruptions. They are essential components of the creative process, even though they look, from the outside, like doing nothing. Every field that studies creativity seriously has arrived at the same quiet conclusion. The work is never only the work. The rest is the other half of the work. Tonight, you are doing the other half. You don't have to believe it to receive it. Your mind is already accepting the gift. Here is a metaphor several researchers have used. The creativity researcher Scott Barry Kaufman has written about what he calls mental breathing room, the empty interior spaces your mind needs in order to move new combinations through. When every inner room is full of obligation, information, and noise, nothing new can be arranged. When rooms are left empty, the mind, on its own, begins to carry things softly from one room to another. This is how combinations happen. Creativity does not come from what you have inside you. It comes from what can still move inside you. Empty rooms are not empty. They are where creation becomes possible. Architects sometimes speak of negative space, the deliberate, designed emptiness that makes the rest of a building breathe. The mind seems to follow the same principle. Studies on cognitive load consistently find that the mind, given periods of true emptiness, no input, no task, no problem to chew on, performs better on later creative measures than the mind kept continuously full. Emptiness is not waste. It is the architecture of inner possibility. Tonight, the rooms inside you are emptying. Gently, one at a time, the light goes out. The door closes softly. Something new quietly arrives. Here is a thought from the neuroscience of consolidation. Throughout the night, neurons that fired together during the day replay their sequences at faster speeds in coordinated sweeps. Sleep researchers describe these sweeps, almost musically, like phrases repeating, varying, rehearsing. This is how memory becomes skill, how skill becomes ease, how ease becomes, sometimes, originality. Your nighttime brain is not a dark machine. It is a small, attentive orchestra, rehearsing softly, adjusting its phrasing, learning how to play the music of your life a little more smoothly each time. Tonight, the orchestra is tuning. You don't have to listen. You only have to let the music happen inside you. Here is one of the gentlest truths in the creativity research, across many studies and many kinds of problems. Researchers find that the best creative solutions tend to arrive not at the desk, but on the way to somewhere else. The commute, the shower, the nap, the walk, the quiet minutes before sleep. This is so consistent that one research group, studying scientists, estimated that roughly half of all reported insights arrived during these soft moments of non-work. The desk is necessary to prepare the ground, but the ground flowers later, somewhere else. When no one is watching it closely, you are somewhere else now. Not at a desk, not watching. Tonight is exactly where many soft answers choose to arrive. Here is a cultural observation that fits the science beautifully. Writers have called the night a studio for centuries. Painters have described working by candlelight, not only for the privacy, but because, they said, the imagination softens after dark. Composers have spoken of melodies arriving only after midnight. Scientists, more quietly, have sometimes done their best thinking in the small hours. Modern sleep and creativity research confirms the folk wisdom, the nighttime brain, with its altered neurochemistry and softened filtering, is genuinely better at certain kinds of imaginative work than the daytime brain. The night is not a metaphor. It is a real, measurable studio inside you. That studio is open tonight. You don't have to work in it. You only have to sleep in it. And let the quiet do the making. Here is a thought, large enough to sit with. Every human being who has ever lived has spent, on average, about a third of their existence asleep. This means sleep is the single most practiced activity in our species. We are extraordinarily good at it. As a species, even if individuals sometimes struggle, and within this enormous quantity of practice, the creative functions of sleep, the weaving, the consolidating, the recombining have been refined over millions of years. In a real sense, the sleeping human mind is a creative instrument that has been evolving since, before anything recognizable as human creativity appeared in waking life. Tonight you are joining that long practice. You are not alone in it. Every sleeping being on earth is in the studio with you. Here is a simple thought to carry close. Every night that you sleep, your brain rearranges. New patterns form. Old patterns settle. Something you could not have thought yesterday becomes quietly available by morning. You may never notice most of these small creations. A slight shift in how you hold an old memory, a small softening of a difficult feeling, a new sentence in a language you are learning, a trick in a skill you are practicing. Creativity is not only the large, famous dreams of history. It is also the small daily making that happens in every sleeping body, including yours. Tonight you are making something. You won't see it, but it will be real. That is the quiet contract of sleep. Here is a gentle clarification of terms. The word creator has, in recent years, become associated with professional creative output artists, writers, designers, content makers. The creativity research uses the word more softly and more widely. A creator, in the older sense, is anyone who takes the given materials of their life, their experiences, their memories, their relationships, their questions, and arranges them into something slightly new. By this definition, every human being is continuously creating, most often without noticing. Your life, viewed from inside, is itself a continuous creative act. Tonight, the creative act is rest. The material is silence. The arrangement is your own breathing, making and remaking itself. Here is a soft thought for anyone who has ever felt they were not creative enough. Cross-cultural studies on creativity beliefs have found that people who believe they are not creative actually score only slightly lower on creativity tests than people who believe they are creative. The belief changes behavior more than the underlying ability. Most of the difference, in practice, is whether or not a person lets themselves try. The creativity is already there. The question is only whether the person has, somewhere along the way, been given permission to use it. Tonight is a kind of permission. Every night is, you are allowed to be as creative as you already are. No more is being asked. No more is needed. Here is a final thought to carry softly into the closing. Somewhere inside you, right now, the quiet loom is moving. Memories are being laid down. Threads are being joined. Impossible small combinations are being tried and released. Tomorrow, perhaps, you will notice one of them as a small clarity, a small idea, a small answer that wasn't there yesterday. Or perhaps you will not notice it, and it will simply ride softly beneath your day, helping without asking for credit. Either way, the work is already happening. You did not have to ask it to. You only had to rest. The loom is kind. The night is kind. And so, tonight, quietly, you are kind to yourself simply by letting sleep begin. All evening, gently, we have been turning over one quiet truth. Creativity is not a rare lightning. It is not a gift reserved for the few. It is not something you must chase. Force, or prove you deserve. It is the soft, continuous work of a mind that has been allowed to wander. Tonight, as you rest, your mind is doing that work. The default mode network is drifting. The alpha rhythm is humming. The hippocampus is opening its library, carrying old images softly into new rooms. Stage 1 is widening its doorway. Hang. A little later, will begin the longer weaving, pairing far apart things with the unhurried patience of the night. You do not have to guide any of it. You are in excellent company. Mendeleev, who saw the periodic table in a dream at his desk. Kekulé, who saw the ring of benzene as a snake. McCartney, who woke with a melody whole. Mary Shelley, who opened her inner eyes one rainy night and saw a pale student kneeling. Elias Howe, who dreamt spears with holes near the tip. Niels Bohr, who saw a solar system. Otto Loewi, who dreamt a Nobel Prize twice, because he could not read his own notes the first time. Einstein, who fell into a reverie at a quiet desk in Bern. These minds did not do something you cannot do. They simply did what your mind is already beginning to do tonight. They let the wandering happen. They trusted the soft room. They did not scold the first strange image. They stayed near the doorway, kindly. So, for these last few moments, let your breath grow a little softer. Perhaps the chest rises gently and falls, the jaw softens, the forehead smooths, the hands open or curled. Rest. The feet heavy and warm. Hold the weight of the body without effort. Somewhere inside you, the 5-year-old who once saw spaceships in boxes is still there. Somewhere inside you, the quiet studio has all its lamps on low. Somewhere inside you, tonight's small creation is already beginning, not as a task, but as a kindness. If nothing arrives by morning, that is enough. Rest is already the most important creative act of the night. If something does arrive, an image, a sentence, a soft clarity, receive it gently. It is yours. It was always yours. The night only helped you remember. And if you have been listening with a question quietly tucked somewhere inside you, you can hand it now to the night. You don't have to phrase it. You don't have to finish the sentence. The night is fluent in unfinished questions. It receives them the way soil receives a small seed, with no urgency, no expectation, only the patient willingness to keep them safe until they are ready to rise. Perhaps the breath grows softer one more time. Perhaps the ribs ease. Perhaps the small muscles around the eyes settle into their resting shape. Perhaps a gentle warmth spreads through the chest, as it always has, on every quiet night that has ever held you. The 100 small facts of this evening can dissolve now. You do not need to keep them. They were never meant to be carried. They were only meant to be soft companions for an evening, a small flock of quiet moths circling a low lamp, and now the lamp is dimming, and the moths are settling, and the room is going still. Whatever the day asked of you, the day is over. Whatever tomorrow may ask, tomorrow will ask gently, when it arrives. For now, only this: the mattress holding you, the breath moving on its own, the mind quieter than it has been in hours, beginning its long, patient, creative work in the dark. You are not alone in it. Every sleeping creature on this planet is somewhere in this same studio with you tonight. Every dreaming animal, every drifting child, every adult who has set down the day's tasks and let the night begin. You are in their company. They are in yours. The studio holds all of you, kindly, without effort. Good night, quietly, with all of this inside you. You are a creator. You have been, all along. Sleep well.